بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. فما بعد, my brothers and sisters, in the last episode I mentioned Surah Al-Nasr, إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. Allah said, when the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to you, O Muhammad sallallahu and you are victorious, which refers to the conquest of Makkah, and you see that the people are entering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion in crowds, glorify the praises of your Rabb and ask for His forgiveness. Seek His forgiveness. Verily, He is the one who accepts repentance and forgives. And I mentioned this to you as one of the ayat and one of the signs in the Quran predicting and foretelling the passing away and departure of Rasulullah, foretelling the completion of his message and therefore the fact that he would shortly be leaving this world. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu used to sit with the senior Sahaba in the court of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu on his invitation. So some of the senior Sahaba asked Sayyidina Umar, why does this young man sit with us when we have sons of his age and they are not invited? So Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu asked them, mentioned this surah, Surah Al-Nasr, and he said, what do you understand from this surah? So they gave different answers. And remember, these are the Sahaba of Rasulullah. These are the people who studied under Rasulullah. So they gave different meanings of this surah. And of course, there's nothing wrong in that. But when Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab asked Ibn Abbas, he said, I understand from it the death of Rasulullah. He said, I understand from this that this surah is foretelling the departure of Rasulullah because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this mission has been completed, you have been given victory. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, therefore on this day, praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek His forgiveness. Also the famous ayat which we mentioned in different contexts earlier, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-Islam dina. Allah said, this day I have perfected your religion for you and completed my favor on you and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. So this is another ayah which also foretells or points to the fact that Rasulullah's mission was about to be completed, and therefore it was time for his departure. And of course, this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when the mission of the Prophet is over, He calls the Prophet to Himself, and therefore this was the same case with Rasulullah. Now, for some ahadith pointing to the passing away, pointing to the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he himself said at the beginning of the khutbatul wada, or the khutbah of Hajj, he said, learn from me the manasik of Hajj, for I may not make Hajj after this year. He said, learn from me the manasik, the rituals and so on of Hajj, because after this year I may not be here to do Hajj. He said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, when he was sending him to Yemen, when you return, you may pass by my grave and my masjid. Now when Rasulullah says, when you may this may happen, we take it and understand it as this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has inspired him to say, and therefore this is a foretelling of a sure event. There's no doubt about this. So he says to Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, when he's sending him to Jabal, when you return, you may pass by my grave and my masjid. And Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu wept. In another place, Rasulullah said, Jibreel alayhi salam used to recite Quran with me once. This is the Dawra of the Quran, where Nabi ﷺ would recite and Jibreel would listen alayhi salam and they would recite. He said, Jibreel alayhi salam used to recite Quran with me once. This year he did it twice and affirmed its correctness. So the one who brought the Quran himself is affirming to the correctness of how it was preserved in the mind and heart of Rasulullah ﷺ and how he conveyed it. Then one day Rasulullah ﷺ woke up late, very late in the night, closer to the last third or something like this, and he called Abu Muwayhiba, his servant, and he said to him, Ya Aba Muwayhiba, I have been commanded to seek forgiveness for the people of Al-Baqiyah. So come with me. They went there and Rasulullah ﷺ said, Assalamu alaikum ya ahl al-maqabir. He said, peace be upon you, O people of the graves. Congratulations that you do not experience what people here are experiencing. Trials and tribulations come like dark portions of the night following each other in succession, the last being worse than the first. Then he looked at Abu Muwayhiba and he said to him, I have been given the choice of the keys of the treasures of the earth, and to live in this world as long as the world exists, and then Jannah, or to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now and Jannah. Abu Muwayhiba, he said, choose us, Ya Rasulullah ﷺ. Rasulullah ﷺ said, no, I have chosen to meet Allah and Jannah. That is now, not at the end. Now remember, the choice here is not dunya or akhirah. For him it is dunya and akhirah, just the duration. So treasures of the dunya, meaning he will be the king, he will be the ruler, he will have any amount of wealth that he wants, everything the heart can desire in this life, and at the end of that, and that life will go on as long as the earth is there, generation after generation, century after century, millennium after millennium, until Allah ends the world, and then he will get Jannah. His Jannah is not being compromised for this. And the second option was meet Allah now and Jannah, and he chose that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he made dua for the forgiveness of the people of Al-Baqiyah, and then they left. And then when he reached home, his terminal illness began. One day soon after that, Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha had a bad headache. And she said, she held her head and she said, oh yeah, she said, her head. She said, oh my head, ya Ra'si, ya Ra'si. Rasulullah said, no, I should say, oh my head, because he also had a terrible headache at the time. When she complained of her headache more, he joked with her and he said, actually, if you were to die with this headache, it would not be such a bad thing, because I would pray for you and attend your funeral. She said, Ya Rasulullah, let someone else have this good fortune, because if I die, you will still have your other wives to care for you. So she used to have this banter with him, and she was the only one who had that kind of relationship. Rasulullah's illness increased. His headache was in spasms, and he also had a severe fever. One of the Sahaba, Rizwanullahi alayhim ajmain, put his hand on Rasulullah, and then he quickly snatched his hand away, and he said, I can't bear to keep my hand on your body, Ya Rasulullah, you have a very severe fever. Rasulullah said, yes, we Anbiya get double the suffering of the people. He went to visit his wives and was in Maimuna radiallahu anha's quarters when he had another attack of severe pain. So he went from there to Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha's quarters and asked all of them to come there to attend to him. His wives agreed to nurse him there. His head was wrapped tightly in a cloth. It was, absolutely tight cloth, and he was leaning on Ali bin Abi Talib on one side and Al-Abbas on another side as he walked, and then he lay down. Rasulullah wanted to go to the masjid to talk to the people and give them his wasiyah, he gives them some advice. So he asked for water from 7 different wells of Medina to be brought and poured over him to reduce his fever. Then he was helped with Ali ibn Abi Talib on one side, and one of the sons of Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib on the other side, who took him to the masjid. He had become so weak that he could not walk on his own. He gave a khutbah, he praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thanked him, and then he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the shuhada of Al-Uhud. This shows his loyalty to his companions and to those who supported him in his mission. Rasulullah literally lived for his ummah continuously. That's all he did. In one hadith he said, as long as I am alive, I am good for you, and when I die, I am also good for you. This asked him, Rasulullah, how can, you're alive, yes, we understand, but when you die? He said, when I am alive, I am with you and I make dua for you, and when I am dead, your information and your ahwal, your conditions and your halat, the things that are happening to you will be presented to me and I will make dua for you. So this is the blessing of Rasulullah. He said, in this khutbah, he said, O Muhajirin, you are increasing in number while the Ansar are not increasing. And obviously this was the case because the Ansar, there were a fixed number of people in Medina, and with attrition, death and so on, that number was decreasing, but Muhajirun, people were coming from everywhere. So he said, O Muhajirin, you are increasing in number while the Ansar are not increasing. They are the ones who supported me in the beginning, so honor the honorable among them and forgive the ones who make mistakes. O people, O men, carry out the expedition under Usama. Your complaint against his leadership is the same as your complaint against the generalship of his father before him. By Allah, Usama is as fit for generalship as was his father. Rasulullah stopped for a while and there was absolute silence. And then he said, O people, there is a slave of Allah who was given the option of this world or what is in the hands of Allah, and he chose what is with Allah. Now Abu Bakr Siddiq started to weep, and people wondered, why is he crying, why is he weeping? 3 days later they knew why he was weeping. Abu Bakr said, Ya Rasulullah, may ourselves and our children be sacrificed for you. Rasulullah stopped him and he said, the person most faithful to me in his friendship and his wealth is Abu Bakr. If I was going to choose anyone other than Allah as a Khalil, it would be Abu Bakr. But I am the Khalil of Allah. Allah has chosen me as his Khalil, and Abu Bakr is my friend and my companion in Islam. All the doors into the masjid are to be shut and sealed except the door of Abu Bakr. Then he said, may Allah curse the Jews and Christians for building houses of worship over the graves of their prophets. No other religion should exist in the Arabian Peninsula except Islam. Take care of your salah, take care of your slaves, fear Allah in the matter of your women, and send out the army of Usama bin Zayd. So see the different elements of this very, very important wasiyah, because the wasiyat is something that which is the final words of anybody, is very critical, because a person in that time is not going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. He's going to be talking about only the things which are the most important, most important. So in this, what do we see? He said, first and foremost, he said, after talking about Abu Bakr Siddiq and so on, he said, he cursed the people who made graves of their prophets objects and places of worship. So he prohibited building structures over graves, and he prohibited using those graves as objects of worship. Now what is the meaning of object of worship? First and foremost, it is object of worship, as in somebody going and making a sajda to a grave and asking the person whose grave it is for favor. So this is a straightforward open shirk, which is just as serious and reprehensible as open idolatry. Another way in which this is prohibited and it must not be done, and it is also shirk, is where people go to the graves and they speak to or they try to appear, they pretend to speak to the person in the grave and ask the person to make dua for them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no dalil for this in Islam. This is complete nonsense. This is people who say there are dalils are telling lies. We know the Quran itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said you cannot make those in their graves to hear. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said those in the graves, they are in a different world. They have no connection with this world. So if somebody is telling you that this can be done, then they are speaking against the ayat of the Quran. So please be very careful. Don't do any such thing. The only thing that we are permitted to do when you go to the grave of anyone is to make dua for them, not to ask them to make dua for you. In the case of Rasulullah we send salam on him, and then again the same thing, we make dua for him and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward him with the best of the best. So the first wasiyat of Rasulullah, the first thing that he warned us against, the first thing which he very emphatically and strongly prohibited was grave worship, was qabr parasti, was to go to graves and to seek favors and do all the kind of stuff that we see. May Allah forgive us. Second thing is, he talked about the Arabian Peninsula, that they should be kept free from everything other than Islam. Any other religion is not permitted to be there. Then he said, take care of your salah. Now imagine, his last words are, take care of your salah. This is how important salah is. Salah is the evidence of our iman. Salah is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah in practice. And then he said, take care of your slaves. And by slaves here is meant, of course, those days they had slaves. But it also means anyone under your control. So it would be your employees, your servants, and so on. This would also extend to extended family. So take care of them, meaning you are responsible for them, you will be questioned about them. And then he said specifically, take care of your women. So this is the first two, all the women in the families, whether it's wives or sisters, mothers, daughters, and so on. Special attention to the women, and the men are being admonished and warned to take care of them. Usama bin Zayd came to meet Rasulullah. Nabi Sallallahu at that time couldn't speak because he was so weak, but he raised his hands towards the heavens and put them on the shoulders of Usama bin Zayd. So he was making dua for Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. Rasulullah could not go out to lead salah, so he ordered that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu should be told to lead salah. Now this is one of the many, or rather the most important proof that Rasulullah chose Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu as his successor, because this was the understood and the most important sign of the imamat, of the leadership of somebody, that this person would be the imam in salah. So Nabi Sallallahu chose Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to be his imam. He said, Muru Abu Bakr fa yusalli bin nas. Order Abu Bakr to lead the people in salah. Aisha radiallahu anha said, I did not want my father to lead salah as I am afraid of controversy, and she said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu he is a very soft-hearted man, and he may be overcome if he stands in your position. Rasulullah sallallahu got irritated when this objection was repeated, and he said, order Abu Bakr to lead the people in salah. And then he said, you women are like the women of Yusuf, always quarreling and so on, and disagreeing with things. Just do what I'm telling you to do. Later, Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, she said, I did not want my father to lead the salah, as people may not like him to stand in the place of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu therefore continued to lead salah on the order and command of Rasulullah from the Thursday onwards. On one occasion, when Bilal radiallahu anhu called Abu Bakr, called the Adhan, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not present. So he asked Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu to lead Salah. Rasulullah heard Sayyidina Umar's voice and he said, Allah and the mu'mineen do not wish that the Amir should be anyone other than Abu Bakr. Now, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was obviously embarrassed and he said to Bilal radiallahu anhu, you put me in this spot. Sayyidina Bilal said, no, as far as I am concerned, I did what is the understood thing here among all of us, which is that after Rasulullah is Abu Bakr and after Abu Bakr is you. So therefore, when Nabi Sallallahu could not lead Salah, he ordered Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and when Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not there, then Sayyidina Umar. But Nabi Sallallahu did not like that in this case, and he said, Allah and the believers don't wish that the Amir should be anyone other than Abu Bakr. Meaning after him, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was to be the Amir. So this is a clear indication that Rasulullah had chosen Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu as his successor. He did not specify it in so many words, in the sense of he did not say, after me Abu Bakr will be the Khalifa or the ruler. But all the indicators, including this one, that Allah and the Mu'mineen do not wish that the Amir should be anyone other than Abu Bakr is more than clear. And so it also happened when the final discussions were happening about the Khalifas, about who should be the Khalifa. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu presented this evidence, and he said to the people, which one of you would accept that they should be the Imam and Abu Bakr should be the Ma'mur, he should be praying behind them. They said, Yadu Billah, they said, may Allah protect us, this is not possible, Abu Bakr is our leader. So Sayyidina Umar then said, he said, I am giving my bayah, my allegiance to Abu Bakr Siddiq, and you also come and do it, and this is what happened. Fatima radiallahu anha used to visit her father every day. He would kiss her and give her his seat. She came to visit him and kissed him. He whispered into her ear and she started to cry. She started weeping. Then he called her and he whispered something else and she smiled. Aisha radiallahu anha tried to get her to tell her what Rasulullah had told her, but she refused. After Rasulullah passed away, then Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha continued to ask Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha. So one day she said to her, he told me that this was the illness with which he would die. And I cried. And then he told me that I was going to be the first person from his household who would join him. And so I smiled. Fatima radiallahu anha said, oh my father, how much pain you are suffering. And he replied, after today, your father will not suffer any pain. There were 7 dinars in the house of Rasulullah. He ordered that they should be given away in charity. Now, in the course of the illness, and remember, all this is happening, and Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, she's seeing her husband dying before her eyes. So she forgot. Rasulullah would lose consciousness and he would regain it. He was going through this phase. And during one such episode, when he came back to consciousness, he asked, he said, what happened to that money? Did you give it away in charity? Sayyidah Aisha said, no, it is still there, I will do it. He asked for it, he said, give me the money. And she put it in his hand, he held it like this, and he said, what a spectacle is this, if Muhammad should meet his Rabb in this state. And so Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha immediately gave the money away. See, I mean, this is a standard, we don't say that, all of us can, we obviously cannot come up to that standard. But the thing to understand here is that, and again, it is not haram to leave behind wealth. All the inheritance laws of Islam are because it is permissible to have wealth and to leave it behind. Just mentioned here that is being made is the question of the love of wealth. So even for his Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam standard, even to have the money itself was something that he did not wish to do. And he wasn't thinking about what will happen to my family, at least this will buy them 3 meals. No. As far as he's concerned, his tawakkul is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is for me and my family, and whatever wealth I have must be given in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was Sunday. Sunday night passed relatively peacefully. Finally on Monday, the Sahaba were in Salatul Fajr, being led by Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Rasulullah moved the curtain aside between his house and the masjid. Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu said, Rasulullah stood there and watched us, and his face was like a full moon. He then came into the masjid leaning on Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu on one side, and Fadl ibn al-Abbas, the son of al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, on the other side. People are praying, they're standing. They were so happy to see him that they almost left Salah. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu raised his voice in recitation to indicate that the Salah must go on. Rasulullah realized that this commotion could only, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu realized that this commotion could only mean that Rasulullah was coming, so he started to move back. But Rasulullah pushed him forward and he said, "You lead." And he sat down beside him and finished his Salah in a sitting position. So he sat on his left, so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was on his right. The ulama say that because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was sitting on the left and Abu Bakr was on his right radiallahu anhu, this means that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was following Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Salah, because you cannot lead the Nabi in Salah. And but Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's indicator to him to move forward and lead shows that he wanted him to lead Salah. This was the last thing that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw, that his ummah is standing together in Salah. And he was very, very happy. This was the indication of the completion of his mission, Alhamdulillah, and the thing that made him the happiest. After Salah, he spoke to the Jama'ah in a clear voice, heard even outside the masjid. He said, "O men, the fire is ready. Subversive attacks are advancing like waves of darkness. By Allah, I will not be held responsible for anything after this. I never allowed anything but that which the Quran allowed and made legitimate, and I have never forbidden anything but that which the Quran has forbidden." Except that, right? May Allah's curse be on those who make graves, who take graves for their masajid, meaning who take graves as places of worship. Imagine, these are the last words. He's so particular that this whole issue of grave worship and so on, which amounts to idolatry, must not happen. Now the Muslims are so overjoyed at the apparent recovery of Rasulullah that Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu asked permission to leave. He said, "We take his battalion, his army, and go." Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu asked Rasulullah, "Ya Rasulullah, it is clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you his blessing and given you good health as we all prayed." Then he said, "I have promised to visit the daughter of Khadija, that was his wife, to spend the day with her." He had two wives, so one used to live outside on the outskirts of Medina. He said, "Can I have permission?" Rasulullah agreed, and he went to Sun on the outskirts of Medina. Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Ali returned to their businesses and their work, and Rasulullah was in Sayyida Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha's quarters. Abdurrahman bin Abi Bakr, the brother of Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, came to see Rasulullah. He had a miswak in his pocket. Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha noticed Rasulullah looking at the miswak, so she asked him if he wanted it. He nodded. So she took the miswak, and on the other side she chewed it, made it soft, and then she put it in the mouth of Rasulullah to clean his teeth. Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha would also recite the Muwayyidat, the Qul A'udhu bil Falaq and Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, and blow into the hands of Rasulullah and then pass his hands over his body. Rasulullah's condition deteriorated rapidly, and he would put his hand into a bowl of water, and his wife and he would wipe his face. He would say, "Al sakratil mauti bil haqq." He said, "The suffering of death is true. The stupor of death is true." Then Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha says, I saw him looking towards the heavens and saying, Balil Rafiq al-Ala, Balil Rafiq al-Ala, Balil Rafiq al-Ala. She said, so I knew that the angel of death has come and asked his permission, and he chose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and did not choose us. She said, then his head turned towards me and I screamed. The news spread all over Medina. Umar radiallahu anhu and Mughira radiallahu anhu rushed into the room. Sayyidina Umar said he is unconscious. Mughira said, radiallahu anhu, he said he is dead, he is passed away. Sayyidina Umar said, you are a man who wants to create fitna. He will not die until he eliminates the munafiqeen. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu went into the masjid, he drew his sword, pulled out his sword, and he said, people are saying that Rasulullah is dead. He is not dead, but he is unconscious, as Musa was unconscious, and he will return. If anyone says that he is dead, I will cut off his head with my sword. So he, big passion on this whole thing. This news reached Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, who was on the outskirts of Medina. He rode back in haste. He did not speak to anyone, went straight into the house of Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, where Rasulullah's body was. He uncovered the face of Rasulullah. He kissed him on his forehead and he cried and he said, you were pure in life and you are pure in death. The death which was ordained for you, you have passed through. He then went into the masjid and he saw Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu shouting at the people, and he said, Ijlis ya Umar. He said, sit down ya Umar. But Sayyidina Umar ignored him. So he started to speak to the people. And they all left Sayyidina Umar and they came to listen to him. And he said, Man kana ya'budu Muhammadan in kana Muhammadan qad mat. Wa in kana ya'budu Allah fa inna Allah hayyun la yamut. He said, whoever worshipped Muhammad ﷺ, meaning they did not do it, but he said, if that is what you were doing, know that Muhammad ﷺ is dead. Whoever worshipped Allah, know that Allah never dies. Then he recited the ayah, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِمْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلًا قَلَبْتُمْ عَلَىٰ آقَابِكُمْ وَمَنْ يَنْقَلِبْ عَلَىٰ عَقِبَيْهِ فَلَنْ يَضُرَّ اللَّهَ شَيْئًا وَسَيَجْزِي اللَّهُ الشَّاكِرِينَ. He recited the ayat of Surah Al-Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is no more than a messenger, meaning he is a messenger. And indeed, many messengers have passed away before him. If he dies or is killed, will you then turn back on your heels as disbelievers? And he who turns back on his heels, not the least harm will he do to Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the reward to those who are grateful. Umar radiallahu anhu says, is this the ayah of the Quran? He knew it was the ayah, but he said that it was as if this is the first time that he had heard it. Then he collapsed. He fell down. And he said, my knees cannot support me anymore. The narrator said, everyone was reciting this ayah as if it was the first time that they had heard it. Sayyidina Usama radiallahu anhu returned and hung up the flag of his command on the door of Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha's house and ordered the army to return to Medina until matters could be settled. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give Rasulullah the best of the best reward that only Allah can give. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him Maqam al-Mahmud. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him Shifa, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those people who Rasulullah will intercede for on the Day of Judgment. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant that we meet him on his house, that we receive the water of the of Al-Kawthar from his blessed hand, that we cross the Sirat behind him in the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are entered into Jannatul Firdaus without hisab, bighayri hisab, in the company and behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in Jannatul Firdaus that we are granted the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we sit at his feet and we listen to the recitation of the Quran bisawti Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by in his voice, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us his own Jalla Jalaluhu's Wajhil Kareem, his beautiful countenance. We ask Allah to give us his own didar, his own ru'ya, that we can see him, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who will be there when Allah will announce and say, from this moment onwards I will never be displeased with you. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.